dancers a round of applause. Thank you so much, flag dancers. Thank you. I've been seeing at a lot of the petition signing stations, there's been some flag dancing going on there. And one of the things we've learned is when you're dancing or you're waving flags, it creates a really special energy. So let's give those flag dancers another round of applause. My name is Benita Peterson. I am a Stay Free Alberta canvasser. Plus, I know we got a lot of canvassers here. Can I have every canvasser in the room stand up? If you got a badge at some point, please stand up. Every canvasser in the room, please stand up. Okay, stay standing, canvassers, stay standing for a second. Now there's some people who signed up to make phone calls and go door to door, and they help in other ways. So if you volunteer in any way, whether it's signage or flag waving, you stand up as well. So if there's any way you help, even if you're not a canvasser, please stand up. And there's more. Thank you. Thank you so much to all the volunteers. They make events like this happen. They make initiatives like a petition happen. And we're so grateful that you're all here tonight. And I can sense in this room that we have a lot of supporters. They're supporters already. They've watched the information online and you are supporters. Perhaps you attended a previous event and you became a supporter. Something to keep in mind is there may also be some people in this room who are undecided. Or perhaps they currently oppose the concept of independence, but they're here to learn more. So just a round of applause for those people. We are so glad you're here. Now, if at some point during the event that you do need the restroom, you just head out the main doors, you go out into the main lobby, you go left, and the restrooms are on the left down in the lobby. For smoking, as long as you're several feet away from the front door, there is a smoking area out front. Be careful when you're out there, there might be some snow and ice and other hazards. Now, one of the announcements I'd like to make before the program starts is, in addition to thanking canvassers, I'd like to thank a few individuals and businesses that have helped a lot with the momentum of this movement. So right here in Morinville, we have Morinville Flooring Center. How about a round of applause? The team at Morinville Flooring Center opened their doors, allowed canvassers to come in and collect signatures, and my understanding is they've been open every day the last while, having petition signature collections. So thank you to Morinville Floor Center. Another big thank you goes to Melanie of St. Albert and her Stay Free Alberta team there. So round of applause. So now I bet you're excited about tonight's program. We have a very rich program for you. You're going to hear from two presenters, and then there will be opportunity for question and answer. And when it's time for the question and answer, we'll get you to line up. When you do ask your question, you get 30 seconds or less. That's it, 30 seconds or less, and then we're moving on. So just so you're aware, if you're interested in watching the recording of tonight, or you know someone who couldn't be here, you can let them know that they can see this live at freedomcalendar.net, and afterwards you can watch it live at freedomcalendar.net. So now is a good time actually to message your friends and say, watch live at freedomcalendar.net on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble. Freedomcalendar.net is where they can watch live right now. And it's where you can watch. Once the event is over, you can watch the entire recording. So as you're handling your phones, I also ask that you mute them. That's our preference. If they could be fully muted, not even on vibrate, just fully muted, or better yet, just turn them right off so that you can fully focus on the event here with no distraction. Our first presenter will be Keith Wilson. After that, we will hear from Mitch Sylvester. Then it's the Q&A. Our first presenter is a lawyer that I first met in Ottawa in February of 2022. I'm sure some of you can guess why I was in Ottawa in February of 2022, supporting the greatest protest in Canadian history. This presenter has stood his ground under pressure. There's a lot of forces at work, and they don't align well with some of us. And this is a gentleman who not only has the courage, the boldness to speak up in resistance to those forces, he's also got the right words. And so I'm sure you've seen some of his material online, and you can hardly wait to hear more. Please welcome Keith Wilson.
Check. Testing. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Thank you. So, why is it so important that we all work together for independence for Alberta? And the reason is, by every practical and objective measure, it makes sense. And what I mean by that is, we know the economics, right? Alberta has the third largest reserve of oil and gas in the world. And not only do we have that, we have this huge agricultural capability. We have the best beef. We have value-added petrochemicals. We have actually a very diversified economy. Those in the East that don't understand Alberta will accuse us of being, oh, it's just oil and gas. No, oil and gas is sugar daddy, man. Like, that's the one that generates the most revenue. But we're actually a very diversified economy. And what I found really interesting and revealing about the last few weeks is you look at what's happening in the world with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. And one of the things, it's not just oil and natural gas that is causing shortages. Australia has 2 refineries. Alberta has 5. Alberta produces 575,000 barrels a day of refined products, whether it's diesel, aircraft fuel, gasoline, etc. Australia, it's 235,000. Think about that, the size of that country. Right? In other words, we're so well positioned. We have the infrastructure. One of the shortages, the ships that are getting stuck, there's 1,200 ships stuck on either side of the Strait of Hormuz right now. And they all don't carry gas and oil. They also carry fertilizer. And guess what one of the places is in the world where we're a net surplus producer and exporter of urea and nitrogen fertilizer? Alberta, right? I could keep going. You know, our capability of producing helium. We're going to have a computer chip shortage soon because the helium that's stuck in those ships and not able to get on ships. We are so uniquely positioned. What's a miracle, really, is that we put up with this so long. That we have all this tremendous wealth. We have this tremendous ability to create employment, to create a really prosperous future for our children and our grandkids. And then we got these jokers in Ottawa that have put in over 10 years deliberate, conscious, carefully designed policies to hold us back. They're literally pinning us down. And despite that reality, we've increased production, because it's shown the resilience of our people. It's shown our hard work. And that's another thing. I've spent a lot of time traveling across this country, and I've lived in different parts of this country. And one of the things that I'm always struck by is the unique culture of Albertans. We have a unique culture. We have a very different culture from Central Canada and Eastern Canada. The reality is, and it's evidenced by their voting patterns, when many of the people in this room that I know and their clients or former clients of mine, I know the first thing that if they think about government when they wake up, what they're going to say to themselves is, boy, I sure hope the government's not going to get in my way today. But when they wake up in Ontario or Nova Scotia, and of course I'm generalizing to some extent, but there is cultural difference here, the first thing they say is, what's the government going to give me today? Right? And we're culturally different. The other points that I wanted to make, and I am going to look at my notes. Here's my speech. I mentioned we are so blessed with the combination of resources. You know, we have this incredible diverse, when you drive around Alberta, it's sometimes like if you drive out to Cold Lake, you're like, wow, that was a long drive. You drive up to Grand Prairie. Wow, that was a long drive. You drive down to Waterton or to Pincher Creek or to Medicine Hat. The diversity. The reason we have a strong film industry in southern Alberta is they can drive an hour and a half from Calgary and go from a desert scene to a mountain scene. You know what I'm saying? So there is no physical reason why we shouldn't be prospering. We have the resources, we have the ingenuity, we have the drive, we have the people. Our problem is we have people in Ottawa who have different priorities. And not only do they have different priorities, the fact that Alberta has generated so much wealth, and we all in this room understand equalization. I love these people who say, well, that's not how it works. You know, you're not a net contributor. Yes, we are. It's very simple. If we stop sending money to Ottawa, and Ottawa didn't send us any money, would we be up or would we be down? And we would be up anywhere from $27 to $47 billion without their help. So the reality is, what Alberta has been forced into doing because of equalization is we've sent so much wealth and excess money to Ottawa that it allows them to be reckless. And what I mean by that is it insulates them from the consequences of their decisions, right? So we've probably all met that kid in junior, that we knew in high school and into his 20s or 30s was still behaving like he was in high school, and the only reason he could do it was daddy was a billionaire or millionaire. And that wealth insulated that person from the consequences of their poor choices. That's what's going on in Ottawa. They make bad decisions. They make ideologically driven decisions. We see how everything's about ideology and their fixation on climate, even though the world's moving away from that hysteria. So I don't think there's reconcilable differences here. In order for Alberta to be treated fairly, they'd have to amend the Constitution to give us more power under the Constitution in terms of how the votes are counted. They're not going to do that. They'd also have to change the division of powers as to who has jurisdiction to make decisions. They're going to always want to be able to control our resources because that's their mechanism to get our wealth. They're not going to agree to change that. So what's unique about Alberta and Canada is that no other Western country has the courts and the constitution of a Western democracy. None other than Canada has provided a legal pathway for a province to leave. Okay, Canada is really unique in this regard. And what I'm talking about is the 1998 decision of the Supreme Court of Canada and the reference case Succession of Quebec. And what the court said in that decision, and it's part of the constitutional framework of Canada now, is that if a clear majority of Albertans, or any citizens, voters of a province, doesn't have to be Alberta, any province, vote on a clear question to leave, that creates a positive legal obligation on part of the federal government and the provincial governments and impacted First Nations to enter into good faith negotiations for the terms upon which that province leaves. In other words, it provides a mechanism for us to tell Ottawa, sorry, we tried, it's not you, it's me, we need to see other people, getting a divorce, and we get to discuss the terms. So we have this legal pathway, thank goodness, and it's real. And, you know, one of the challenges was, when I'm looking at this, and I started looking at this years ago, was, well, do we have referendum legislation? Oh, check, we got that. And then a number of years ago, the government of Alberta brought in citizen initiative legislation to allow a petition. If you hit the threshold on the petition, that obligates the provincial government to hold a referendum. And I'm like, okay, this can actually work. So we have the legal pathway. We see the support that's building. You know, when you look at the federal government, the Liberal government under Trudeau and Carney have accumulated more debt and deficit than all of the other governments of Canada combined. And what does that do? They've got your credit card, man. They up the limit and they're going crazy with it. Not just your credit card, your kid's credit card and your grandkid's credit card and your great-grandkid's credit card. And the only way to stop this madness, to cut up that credit card, is to vote for independence on October 19th. I'll be right back. So what do they got? They got fear and they got emotion. So they say things like, oh, well, you can't do this. You can't leave. You can't leave because, I love this one. You can't leave because it will create investment uncertainty. Wow. And what have we witnessed? $600 billion. $600 billion worth of projects that were proposed and approved by companies and investors to go ahead in Alberta were scrapped because of the uncertainty that Ottawa continues to create about whether or not projects can even be approved, or how much carbon tax, industrial or otherwise, about emission regulations, net zero rules. So they're really calling the kettle black on that. What happened 3 weeks ago? Canadian Natural Resources announced that it was scrapping, or putting on hold at least, an $8.2 billion upgrade and project in Fort McMurray for oil sands. Why? Was it because of talk of independence? No, it was because of this madness obsession that Mark Carney has, that he's going to save the world from gases and impose a carbon tax that they don't know the value of. And if it turns out between the emission regulations, the pathway project, and the carbon tax, it's $10, $20, $15, $30 a barrel, well then they've got no profit and they can't go ahead with their project. What did the president of Enbridge announce last week in Houston? Same thing, that the reason they can't commit to a pipeline is Enbridge doesn't have oil. They make pipelines for people to put their oil in. Well, companies can't commit to purchasing capacity in that pipeline because they don't know whether it's going to be profitable to expand production. So this whole notion of uncertainty is really important, but it's not independence that's creating it. It's Ottawa's ideologically extremist policies that are creating it. And the way to bring certainty for investors is for Alberta to become independent, because we're not going to have a carbon tax. Here's another one. They go, remember what happened in Quebec? All the big banks left. They all went to Bay Street in Toronto. Yeah, they're banks. They're head offices. It's like an office lease. Okay, there's a penalty when you terminate it. I was talking to someone with a very large international corporation, called me last week on a related matter to this, and I won't do anything to identify them. But they said this whole notion that companies are going to leave Alberta is pure nonsense. And he explained to me, which is obvious when you think about it. He said his company can't leave because the raw input product is here in Alberta. But that's not it, because you could ship it, right? The other reason they can't leave is because the many billions of dollars worth of investment they've made into their plants and infrastructure are here. You can't hire Joe's House Moving to move a multi-billion-dollar plant to another province. But he said the most important reason is not the first two. It's the workers. The know-how, the expertise, the training, the experience. He said we won't find that anywhere else. He said, so it doesn't matter what happens in Alberta, we're staying. And that's the reality for most of our economy. Oh, this one drives me crazy. The First Nations will block it. All right. Okay, so we got Treaty 6, 7, and 8. Unlike British Columbia, which is unceded territory, meaning there is virtually no treaties covering British Columbia, all of Alberta is covered by these 3 treaties. The first page of each of the treaties say words like, we the First Nations hereby forever cede, transfer, assign, bequeath, surrender, all our right and title to all of the lands within the territory, in return for a whole bunch of things: traditional hunting rights, education, healthcare, agricultural implements, a whole list of things, which is fine in my view. When the treaties were formed, reserves were set up. There's 48, I believe, First Nation reserves in Alberta. And those reserves are little enclaves, and we've all driven through them. There's some close to here. And the land within a reserve is owned by the federal government in every reserve. And the affairs of the First Nations are administered by Ottawa under the Indian Act. First Nations, because of the treaty, there was a treaty signed in 1700 that applies, that gives First Nations the right to freely travel across international boundaries. So if you know any First Nations and they have a treaty card, they don't need a passport to get into the US. They just show up at the border, show their treaty card, and away they go. So if Alberta becomes independent, one of the options for the First Nations is status quo. One of the options for the First Nations is that they just carry on like before. Their land will continue, their little enclaves will continue to be owned by Ottawa. They'll continue to have their affairs administered by under the Interac Act by Ottawa, and they'll be able to travel freely in the new country of Alberta, just like they're able to travel freely across international borders right now. Nothing changes. There's no need to ask them for consent, because we're not changing anything. They'll still have their traditional hunting rights and trapping and so on, and fishing. Another option the First Nations will have, and each individual First Nation will have this choice, is they may say, Ottawa hasn't been that good for us, we'd like to try you guys. So they may say we want Edmonton to administer the treaties instead. A third option for any one of the First Nations would be to say, these things were negotiated in the 1800s, it's 2026, let's try and negotiate a new deal. But you see here, where's the threat to the First Nations? They can have the status quo, or they themselves can decide to make changes. So all of this rhetoric about First Nations having a veto, oh, you can't transfer the land because the First Nations agreement was with the Crown, it's all patent nonsense. There's no basis for it in law whatsoever. So if someone says, oh, the First Nations can block it, it's pure nonsense. Next one is, I love this one. It's Crown land. It's Crown land. Alberta doesn't have any land. It's Crown land. I'm like, oh boy. All right. Little legal 101 here. There's 2 crowns. Actually, there's more than 2 crowns. There's the provincial crown and there's the federal crown. So for example, when I sued the federal government because they froze Tamara Leach and Chris Barber's bank accounts, I sued His Majesty the King in the right of Canada. And when, for some of the people maybe in this room, when the government screwed up and flooded out your land with some irrigation project or some ditch work, and I had to sue the Alberta government, I sued His Majesty the King in the right of Alberta. In other words, there's a federal crown and there's a provincial crown. The lands in that make up Alberta originally were granted by a charter from the King in 1670 to the Hudson's Bay Company. The Hudson's Bay Company surrendered that in 1869 to the Dominion government. That's when Rupert's Land became the Northwest Territories. Canada became a country in 1867. All of the land in Alberta became part of the province of Alberta in 1905. And that meant the federal government at that time owned all the mines and minerals, because as you guys know, some of you might be freehold owners, but with that exception, you know on your land title, what does it say? It says your land description, and then reserving unto His Majesty the King all mines and minerals and the right to work the same. So we're an anomaly. You guys remember the Beverly Hillbillies, that TV series? And Jed Clampett shot their squirrel or something, and the oil came out of the ground, and then they all loaded up on the old car and drove to Beverly Hills. Well, why did they suddenly get rich? Because in Oklahoma, in Texas, in Nebraska, you own the mineral rights under your land. You don't in Canada, well, you don't in Alberta and Saskatchewan, because on 1889, September 17th, Order in Council 1070, just to be precise, the federal government changed the law, because they were settling the West, they were about to put in the National Railway, and the trains ran on coal. And someone said, it was Senator Cochrane, said, wait a minute, so we're going to bring in and give homestead, including mineral rights, to all of the homesteaders where the coal is? How are we going to run the trains? So I went, oh, let's put a reservation on title. That's an anomaly. In Ontario, you own the mineral rights, okay? So it's weird. These guys in Ontario don't understand that. They don't understand this history that we have here. So when Alberta became a province, all the mines and minerals, except with some limited exception, some of the early titles went to the surface owner. The minerals were owned by the federal government. In 1930, because Alberta was upset that they were being exploited by Ottawa, there was a separatist movement that started. And to bring the temperature down, the government in Ottawa agreed through the 1930 Natural Resources Transfer Agreement to transfer the ownership of all mines and minerals, unoccupied Crown land, and water from the federal government to the Alberta government. Okay, so that's the chain of title, both for the land and the oil and gas. So when Alberta votes to leave, Alberta takes the oil and gas. When Alberta votes to leave, Alberta takes the Crown land. So, and then there's some weird argument that keeps popping up. And they say, well, somebody said, because of Section 109 of the Constitution. I'm like, oh my God, did you even read Section 109? That if we leave, we'll have to give the oil back. It is absolute nonsense. So when you hear these fear-mongering things, understand that they're nothing but fear. And they're not true. But what do we have? We have a path forward to actually do this. This is real, guys. This is not some sovereign citizen, flat earth stuff. This is real. This is clearly set out in law, and we have a legal process. And we're well on our way to implementing it. The Premier has announced, as you know, that there will be a referendum on a number of questions on October 19th. And, it's almost a certainty if we keep hustling, getting the signatures in, that we're going to have a referendum on independence. Now, but that's where the real work's really going to begin. I mean, we got to make sure we get the numbers in on the signatures. But from May till October, that's where it's going to decide whether we pull this off. And what I mean by that, and some of you have heard me talk or seen some of my videos, you'll know what I'm about to say. There's the third. We've got the 1/3 that are never going to vote in favor of independence, even if you give them $100,000 cash, a brand new electric vehicle, and 3 brand new pride flags. They're not doing it. And there's many of you in this room that I could go to your house, and I would never do this, this is for illustration purposes only, and I could kidnap your dog, and you're still going to vote, right? So that's set. It's the middle third that we have to get to. It's the undecided. It's the unengaged. There's 2 categories within that middle third. There's those who have haven't made up their mind, but there's also a third, or part of it rather, that they're busy with life, right? They don't know who the premier is, they don't pay attention to these things, so we're gonna have to get to them. So one of the things that I think will help them, and this is something I'm spending a lot of time on right now, is we need a detailed plan. So I've pulled together, and I'm in the process of forming what's called the Alberta Transition Council, and we're working on a white paper, an analytical type document. These are very boring people, but very smart, with expertise in international trade, monetary policy, foreign affairs, military, all of the aspects that we need to transition from being delivered by Ottawa to having them delivered by Alberta. And it's going to answer a lot of questions. But one of the things that, and they're exploiting that, right? Those who are against us, and they're going to increasingly so, they're going to create fear by capitalizing on the uncertainty. You know, what are you going to do with the veterans? How are you going to recreate a military? All of these things. This white paper is going to lay that out. Because one of the things that's really interesting about this whole exercise, when you just stop and sit back and think about it for a minute, we have not all been hired here by Elon Musk and asked to figure out how to create a human habitat on Mars, something that's never been done. We're being asked to figure out how we're going to run a passport office on Jasper Avenue. They even have a passport printer there, so we're going to have to figure out whether the guy who currently works the printer in First Edmonton Place there on Jasper Ave would be willing to switch his payroll from Ottawa, you know, that Phoenix system, what a rock star that is, to getting paid by the new government of Alberta, right? Like, Rumsfeld, the Secretary of State Rumsfeld during the war with Iraq, I still remember he went to the podium and he said, there are known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. We're in the realm of known knowns, and we don't have any unknowns here. All of the services that we need the new Alberta government and the free and independent country to take over are already being delivered, right? And actually quite poorly and very expensively. So this is not rocket science. What we need to do is figure out, so the border guards, you know, when you land at the Edmonton airport, there's the border service guys with their uniforms. We would have to, you guys ready for this? We would have to change the Canadian flag on their uniform to an Alberta flag. Wow. But I mean, how hard is that going to be? We will let them know on a transitional basis, for example, that they, on the closing date of the completion of the transition, that they will go from being paid by the federal government to the Alberta government, right? Like, this is not actually, when you sit back and think about all that needs to be done, it's really not that complex. So that brings me to my next and just about final point, which is this. Some people, so according to the Supreme Court of Canada, once a clear majority vote on a clear question for independence, the next steps are to enter into good faith negotiations, okay? And they're under a positive legal duty, the federal government and the provinces are, to enter into good faith negotiations. Well, what if they, well, first of all, does anybody here think they're gonna enter into good faith negotiations? It's okay, either do I. Some people are right, like, Mr. Wilson, you're so naive, you think they're actually going to do this. And I'm like, actually, no, I don't. So what did the Supreme Court of Canada say if they don't, if the parties don't enter into good faith negotiations? What they said in paragraph 154 and 155 is it doesn't preclude the province that's voted to leave to unilaterally declaring its independence and seeking international recognition. And what's interesting is the last two times Quebec tried it, the American government, one was Bill Clinton, the other, I can't remember who the president was very quick to say before the vote, if you guys vote to leave, we are not recognizing you. Who's in the White House right now? What's his name again? So we're in a different situation. We're in a different time. And something else happened last September that blew my mind, which was this idea of countries recognizing breakaways from other places in the world. Doesn't happen that often. But what did Mark Carney do in September of 2025? This guy in the front row is just itching to say the answer. But I'm going to steal it from him because I have the microphone. Is that he announced recognition of the Declaration of Independence by the state of Palestine. And they don't even have a border, right? So I was sitting there watching this going, has anybody briefed this guy on paragraph 155 and what's going on in Alberta? Because he just refreshed, revalidated, gave credibility to this alternative mechanism that's before us. So those who say, oh, the negotiations will take years or decades, no. We know the functions we need to take over. There's no unknown unknowns here, right? In my view, and I've dealt with some really complex litigation, as some of you in the room know, my view is there's no reason for this negotiation to last longer than 90 days. I think after the referendum is held, Alberta will present its, here's our draft settlement for the divorce. Here's what we'll pay for the 5 national parks. Here's what we'll pay for the 4 army bases, but we're not antique collectors, so don't get the equipment out. We don't want that. Here's how much of you owe Albertans for their own share that they've paid into throughout their lives into the pension plan. We lay it all out in a fair and logical way. We invite them to negotiations. Hopefully they'll come. But if they're not going to engage in if they're not going to engage in good faith negotiations and engage in bad faith, then we resort to the other option, and in January we declare our independence. So let me close with this. One of the challenges we're going to have is they're going to pull on our heartstrings about Canada, and that Canada that we all once knew and loved. And everyone in this room knows the truth, that Canada doesn't exist anymore. And what we're trying to do through independence, one of the many goals, is to recreate those values, to recreate that opportunity that I had for my kids and my grandkids. So our emotional pitch is, I'm not doing this for me. There's many people in this room know that I could be doing far more profitable things than volunteering my time for this cause, and I'm happy to do so, is that someone said to me, aren't you afraid you're going to lose? And I said, I'll tell you what. Do you know what scares me more? What scares me more is not trying to achieve this and my kids and grandkids having to live in an increasingly dystopian, impoverished Canada. It's a real opportunity. If we all work hard, we can do this. The pathway for the future for our kids and our grandkids is to work hard for independence. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Keith Wilson. Before our next presenter, I have to let some of you know about the way your cars are parked. Some people have parked their vehicles on 100th Avenue. So 100th Avenue is that highway going past us. Well, the RCMP paid us a visit. Actually, the other day I met with an Alberta sheriff. in Westlock. That was interesting. But anyway, the RCMP paid us a visit and they stated anybody parked on 100th Avenue, please move your vehicle now. There's about 12 vehicles parked there. Please go move them right away. He doesn't want to ticket and tow you. Another item to take note of, I took a tip from Keith's message. He talked about how we need to win over the undecided people. We win by winning people over. So I propose that supporters of independence get involved in parades this summer, starting with St. Albert in May. And then when it's time for that Morinville parade, it's not a standard parade. There's no cars, there's no tractors. It's people powered. It's walking. So all those beautiful flag bearers that were up here, and I'm sure there's more in the audience, we could be walking with our flags. We could have a big, beautiful banner like this on a wagon. Let's get out in those parades this summer. How many support that? Speaking of terrific local supporters in the St. Albert, Morinville areas, can we just have a round of applause for Shelby and Scott Hayes for all the work they've done? And a round of applause for Sights and Arms in St. Albert, allowing petitions there. In addition to supporting the Stay Free Alberta petition, they're also allowing a recall petition against the NDP MLA of St. Albert. So you might want to find out more about that in the lobby later. Now our next presenter is the proponent of this petition. And I had the privilege of meeting him back in 2022, working on other initiatives and projects. I've worked actually with him in different organizations. And he just works steadily, steady as she goes, towards a free Alberta. I met him in 2022. I saw his initiatives there. I saw him involved in 2023, elections, politics. He's no stranger to it all. So please welcome Mitch Sylvester.
Thank you, everybody. Well, how many people are at their first political meeting ever? Good. It's very important that you attend these from now on. Just saying. Do you agree that the province of Alberta should cease to be a part of Canada to become an independent state? Yes or no? I guess we're home. Well, I have some very bad news for everybody in the room. We're a colony. We've always been a colony. That has never changed. When Alberta was annexed in 1904, this is what they said. We desire, and every Canadian desires, that the great trade of the prairies shall go to enrich our own people in the east, to build up factories in the workshops of Eastern Canada, and contribute in every way to its prosperity. And that has never changed. So I want you to clearly understand that by the time I'm done here, you will understand what I'm saying right now. And this is how it went in the 80s. Now, understand that the relationship we have with Ottawa is a business relationship. It's a buying group, so to speak. So what happens is we have 10 or 12 provinces, however you want to look at it, and they're supposed to make each other better off. That's the goal of Confederation. The goal of Confederation is, by all being in a group, you can buy better, you can sell to each other, make each other better off, and the ultimate goal is to make the whole union more profitable. However, in our case, the people in Ottawa have this attitude. They say, screw the West, we'll take the rest. How does that work? If you're in a buying group with a group of people that clearly say that they want to screw you and take advantage of you, especially place like Alberta, who's producing $47 to $50 billion net towards that business. Why would they not want to make Alberta happy? Why would they want to take advantage of one of their business partners? I don't understand. Mark Lalonde said in 1980, he said, we could not let Alberta become the center of economic power in Canada. And I want to ask you, why not? Would that not benefit everybody? Would that not be better for the whole union? Would that not create jobs for everybody? Would that not create wealth for Canada? So how is it that, according to our Premier, that Ottawa is actually sabotaging Alberta? Sabotaging is a war word. Consciously making it less productive. And we're supposed to be in a buying group together. So I will just share something with you from my own personal business. I'll explain to you how this could work. I fly to Fort Worth every year to buy hunting, outside products, guns, ammo, fishing, all manner of stuff. There's 450 stores in this group. This group allows a little store in northeastern Alberta to buy the same way or better than Cabela's buys. So what does that do for us? It allows us to sell at the same price they're selling at and be profitable, right? So that's why we would become part of a group, because it makes us better off. However, in Alberta, oh, look at that. That one's out of spot, but let's get you involved with this. Mr. Carney demands that the Supreme Court strip provinces of the right to pass their own laws. What do you think of that? So we'll go here, where they said that we shouldn't have this power, and now we're going over there saying we shouldn't have any power. Pretty interesting. I wonder how our Premier feels about that.
Ottawa overtaxing us. I mentioned that at the beginning of the evening, that we have our program costs are 70% of all tax dollars. We only collect 40%. Ottawa collects 60%, and then they use political means to transfer it. Alberta, year after year, has $20 to $25 billion that is siphoned out of our system to go to Ottawa so that it can be spent mostly in Quebec, but also in other places that vote Liberal. We have been watching this for years. $600 billion in the last 40 or 50 years that have been taken out of this province. You don't think we might be able to do a little bit more on social spending if those $20 to $25 billion stayed here? You don't think we'd be able to cut taxes a bit if those $20 to $25 billion stayed here? It is $5,000 per Albertan that every single year gets transferred out of this province for political reasons so that the Liberals can continue to spend it places that vote Liberal.
All right, so Alberta's not happy. So the Premier came to Morinville right after the federal election, and I said to her, what do you think of Mr. Carney? We were sitting having a town hall discussion in front of a room like this, and she said, you first. So when we got to the end of that, I said, well, I'm not very high on Mr. Carney. As a matter of fact, I've gone from actually supporting or thinking I could possibly support an independent Alberta within Canada to absolutely thinking that we'll never have another Conservative government again as long as we live. And so therefore, I don't think it's fixable. And she said to me, she said, well, if that's the case, you know, I don't know if I believe that. Well, I said, well, let's do a straw poll here in the room. 800 people at $250 a plate come to see the Premier. And I said, anyone in the room that agrees with an independent Alberta, please stand up. 800 out of 800. So the Premier said, well, whoa. Like, okay, like, I mean, I know some of you are intimidated. Is there anybody in the room that says, let's give Canada more of a chance? Zero. So guess what? The Premier always comes to Bonnyville first to do her events. We never got one of those next panel events. So, but here's the point of this slide right here. And I said to the Premier, I said, how long are you going to give Mr. Carney to do something for Alberta? Well, she said he's coming out with his major projects plan. I said, well, good, let's have a look at that. So in his major projects plan, he's got 4 for BC, 1 for Saskatchewan, 1 for Manitoba, 3 for Ontario, 2 for Quebec, 1 for New Brunswick, and 1 for Newfoundland. They consciously skipped Alberta. They did that on purpose. Why would they do that? Are they trying to push us out? Like, honestly, are they trying to push us out? Why would you not, if the province that contributes the most to Confederation is not happy, is threatening to leave, why would you not build us a pipeline? Well, no, I understand that we're not happy about it, but why would they do it? Because they're absolutely trying to sabotage our industry. And why would they sabotage the industry of the province that contributes the most to the country? I just don't understand it. Maybe because they think they can. And these are bills that harm Alberta exclusively. They block our pipelines. We have a tanker ban in the west. We'll get into that in detail. Blocks oil and gas investment, somewhere in the neighborhood of $600 billion. And when we win in court over carbon tax, the Supreme Court rules against us. So, wrap your head around this. Danielle said $20 to $25 billion. That's what we send in transfer payments to the rest of the country. The rest of that is taxes, hidden taxes, excise taxes. That comes to $47 billion. So, we send $47 billion net to Ottawa every year. We actually send $70 billion. They send us $23 billion back. So how much money is that? That's $40,000 per Alberta household every year. So unpack that. That would pay for a house for you. And you send that every year. So in your lifetime, you're actually giving Ottawa a house. That's $3,500 a month per household. So just wrap that around your brain and try and understand how that works. Okay. How does it work in Parliament? The House of Commons, the West, has 104 seats. The East has 239. In the Senate, we have 24 senators. They have 81. Understand those are appointed by the Liberals because they're in government more than the Conservatives, far more. And we have 2 justices in the West and 7 in the East, and they're all bilingual. Most bilingual people tend to vote Liberal. I know that, that's my heritage. My heritage is French-Canadian, and a lot of French Canadians are voting Liberal, and still to this day, now that I have a new stand, I've lost a lot of friends in the French-Canadian community. All right, so the point of that is that the system is set up to work exactly the way it's working. The system is rigged for the East. Transfer equalization payments, now here's the big question. How does that work? We pay $25 to $27 billion a year in equalization payments, of which Quebec gets 13.3 or 13.6, depending on the year. They get to cook the books. They absolutely don't have Hydro-Quebec in their balance sheets. Hydro-Quebec is their biggest industry. They sell a lot of power actually to New York and right across from Quebec and everywhere else. It's their biggest industry, like our oil patch. But they don't get to include it because it's a green industry. So as a consequence to that, they become a have-not province. And we, of course, put our oil patch in there, and we have to pay them $13 billion a year every year. That's 2 years in a row. So I want you to understand what that actually is and does. We pay per taxpayer, per province, Manitoba, somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,800, Quebec, $2,800, New Brunswick, $6,500, Nova Scotia, $5,800, PEI, $6,100, and Newfoundland, $729. So I want you to understand this. When the Premier says that we give these transfer payments to places that vote Liberal, that will continue to vote Liberal to keep this so that they can stay in power. So we're actually buying they're buying votes with our money. So I want you to also understand that that is per taxpayer, so expand that by per house. Some of that's $1,000 a month per household that they would have to pay if we weren't paying it for them. 20% of their entire tax load. So why is that pertinent? because in order to open the Constitution, you need the consent of 7 out of 10 provinces and 50% of the population. So do you think we could get 7 out of 10 provinces there to support not paying equalization payments? And we need the support of the House of Commons and the Senate, which is mostly Liberal appointed. Quebec has a veto. How's that work? They didn't even sign the Constitution. So according to its own rules, our Constitution is not real because Quebec never signed it. And if that's the case, and they have a veto. How does Quebec have a veto? And if you get by all that, the Supreme Court would have to approve what you're doing. Not happening. That's why the Constitution's never been opened. That's why the Premier, when she says we got 4 constitutional questions that are all redundant as far as I'm concerned, that they can never, it will never happen. They will never open the Constitution. I've challenged her to please open the Constitution before we get to the vote, so we can understand that it could actually happen. All right, let's talk about pension. If you're born a subject of the Crown, you stay a subject of the Crown for life. Now, when I was doing town hall pensions, I remember people walking in the room and yelling and screaming their heads off about hands off our pension. And I'll tell you what, actually, those were much more contentious meetings than these, somehow. People were more worried about their pension than they were about Alberta seceding from the Union, so to speak. So what we have here is look at the big red line on the left. Alberta pays more than its share. Way more than its share. Kenny did a study called the LifeWorks study on why or what we would do with this money. Because understand this is what happens. Our workers contribute $9 billion a year to CPP. Our seniors collect $6 billion a year. According to the CPP Act, that $3 billion overage goes into a fund for Alberta seniors. Now just understand that, and since the 60s we've been over-contributing, so that money, that overage, plus interest, actually belongs to the seniors of Alberta. And according to the LifeWorks report, what the federal government, Canada Pension, owes Alberta seniors is $333 billion, but that was 2 years ago. Plus interest, now that's $400 billion. So that is money that actually belongs to Alberta seniors. That money does not belong to the government of Canada, does not belong to the government of Alberta, it belongs to Alberta seniors. Just understand that. So, back when I started on the pension program, the Premier was on our side of this, and we were trying to garner support, which we moved from 30% to 55% by doing 100 town halls. But the whole point of it is why has she not called us back? Because the Federal Conservative Party of Canada, just before the election, actually asked her not to because it would be unfavorable for Pierre, and she thought that he had a chance to win, and we weren't going to do that before the federal election. However, my take on that is, this is an Alberta seniors pension, so let's just unpack the numbers here. According to their interest figures of what they get on CPP, which is what they said they get 9.5%. If we had the $400 billion, and let's round it off to 10, that would be $40 billion a year in interest. Our workers contribute 9, our seniors collect 6. We could actually give you a 6-fold increase in pension if we had that money back. And we could invest that $400 billion here in Alberta to make ourselves better off, which they're currently not doing. But nobody yelled hands off our pension when Carney invested $100 billion in India. That was 3 weeks ago, a month ago. Half of that money belongs to the seniors of Alberta. So why would they not invest that here? Is there anything that comes to mind that we could use here that would help make us richer, that would help employ our own people? Why is nobody screaming to Mr. Carney, hands off our pension? And like I said, that is literally half of Alberta's money because we're half of the pension. Well, they gave themselves the authority. They're ruling. And I'll tell you what, government is supposed to be independent of that. That is one of the rules of the CPP. And so, however, this whole conversation is about what's going on in Ottawa. So, just bear with me for a minute, it'll be very clear. When I became Premier, I thought I could fix everything in 6 or 7 months, but everything's broken. That's me and her having that same conversation. I asked her about Carney. The problem is, at her level, if she can't fix the problem, what's the problem? It's too corrupt to fix. That's the problem. Now understand this. Alberta is the richest piece of real estate in the world. The next richest piece of real estate in the world is probably Saskatchewan. So we're right next door to each other. We would have to be naive to believe that people don't want what we have. And we would also have to be naive to think that they're not coming for it right now, because that's exactly what they're doing. We have trillions and trillions of dollars worth of assets and no liabilities, and Keith went into detail on how capable our people are. Our people are producers. Our people make the wealth from the ground, whether it's farming, oil, whatever, we create wealth. These people are gatekeepers. These people are here to take the wealth. They cannot create the wealth. And that's one of the reasons why this will become a very strong country, because all of the people required to make this work are already here. All right, so let's look at the problem. Let's start here. An audit of $187 billion worth of Liberal infrastructure spending finds 20,000 missing projects. That means they were paid for but not built. 20,000 out of 187 billion. And if that's hard to believe, we found a report from the Auditor General of Canada to the Parliament of Canada in 2025. And the report says this: we found that in 54% of contracts, under 54% of contracts examined, federal organizations had evidence to show that all services and deliverables were received. That's in 54%. However, in 46% of contracts examined, we found that the federal organization had little to no evidence to support that deliverables were received. That's half. That's half. That's a report from the Auditor General of Canada last fall, and I want to ask you a question. How come nobody went to jail? Like what's half of that? That's $93 billion, or $90 billion. How come no one's going to jail? Because our politicians are above the law. The laws are there to send them to jail. Mr. Guilbeault didn't go to jail. He siphoned out $254 million into his business account. He's not in jail. Mr. Trudeau, $400 million on the Green Slush Fund, $250 million for a vaccine factory that never produced a vaccine. Where'd all that money go? And how come nobody's looking into it? And ArriveCan, $75 million, and the court ruled in our favor, but the judge sealed it for 75 years. How does that work? Mr. Trudeau spent $11 billion on gender programs overseas. Does anybody believe that? So what I'm trying to tell you is what happened to the money. That $11 billion left Canada. And I don't know if this is true, but I'm going to share this with you. What do you think the odds are he would go to a foreign leader and he would say, I'm going to give you $1 billion, please give me 900 million back? Like, really? I want to ask you if you think that's a possibility. Now, I ask this question every night, so I'm going to ask you. How many people, before you came here tonight, actually believe that the Liberals are stealing from you? Hands up. Okay, so every night it's the same thing. We know they're stealing from us. So our decision right now is either we're going to continue to condone it or we're going to do something about it. And that's where we are. I mean, that's exactly where we are right now. We're either, and if we, and I don't believe we will, because I believe Albertans will stand up, but imagine what's going to happen moving forward if they continue to get away with this. They will actually take this as a vote of approval to continue doing what they're doing. And I got more bad news for you. That money's borrowed. Because they're absolutely running deficit budgets every year. So you're paying interest on that money. That's money laundering is what that is. So we're paying $1 billion a week or thereabouts in interest based on this money that's being misappropriated. And guess what? The RCMP this week, union officials quit because they allege election interference within the RCMP. Millions of dollars change hands so that they could keep the people elected that they wanted elected. And who would those people be? The same people that aren't prosecuting our politicians. We have another problem. Foreign interference is the greatest strategic threat facing Canada's national security, says CSIS. And we just discussed election integrity, but there's more. Trudeau must reveal which 11 federal candidates China reportedly aided. He never did. Why did he not investigate that? Because he famously said this. He said, well, we didn't know. It didn't affect the results of the election. It didn't affect the results. And my question is, how would he know that before the election happened when they were interfering? So I just want you to understand that they might have had an idea how it was going to turn out. And I don't know if that's true or not. But I'm questioning why they didn't investigate the Chinese interfering in our election. And one of the people that the Chinese helped was Marion G. And she lost $130 million on a promise of promoting business startups and creating jobs with a project that never happened. And they're asking her there, where's that $130 million? And she says, well, I don't know. Look at the look on her face. I don't know where that money is. She didn't go to jail. And we're about to have our first unelected majority. So is anybody paying attention that that lady that walked across the floor got a $500 million project for building homes in that area, and they have 2 employees? That wasn't a bribe. No, that wasn't a bribe. 120,000 mail-in ballots went uncounted last year in the election. Do you remember how close some of those ridings were? One of them was by 1 vote, if you recall. We have another problem, organized crime. Why do we have an organized crime problem in Canada? Because we don't have money laundering or racketeering laws, basically. These gentlemen were asked how many people are involved in the fentanyl trade in Canada. And he said 4,000. And the gentleman on the left, this is the RCMP they're talking about, the head of the RCMP. The guy on the left said, is that groups or families or people? He said that's groups. So there's basically, if you break it down, there's 300 plus organized crime families in every province. And I learned something the other day that totally shocked me. And I think it'll shock you too. How much does it cost to buy a pill to get stoned on the street? $3. $3 is what it costs for a hit of fentanyl on the street. So what is that telling you? Actually, we had a meeting the other night with Aboriginal people, and this came from one of the ladies there. She was explaining that to us. So what that tells me is they're trying to kill them all. If it's $3 to get stoned on fentanyl, that's why when they break into cars, they steal the change, but they don't grab the hundreds of dollars worth of stuff that's in the truck. Because for $20, they could get high for a week. I don't know what you think about that, but it shocked me. All right, so how much crime has risen in Canada in the last 10 years? Look at the numbers. Look at the organized crime numbers. Human trafficking, 210%, extortion, 429%, child pornography, 565%, and that's hooked right into human trafficking. We have a big human trafficking problem here in Alberta. Realize it or not. Fentanyl, we were just discussing. 8 tons of chemical to make fentanyl found in Fox Creek. 8 tons. The guy got 16 years in jail. And how does that happen? Well, they only inspect 1% of the cargo coming into Port of Vancouver and Port of Prince Rupert. So they don't inspect anything. And they're allowing all this to come in. And where's this coming from? Is it coming from China? The Chinese are sending chemicals to Alberta, and Canada and Alberta are becoming one of the hubs for producing this stuff and are becoming famous worldwide for exporting it all over the world. And in the United States, this was the #1 problem identified by the President of the United States when they're tariffing us, and they lose 300,000 kids or people a year to opioid overdoses over there, more than they lost in the Vietnam and Korean War. And in BC, Bonnie Henry says, she advises BC to offer smokable fentanyl in a report. This is the health minister for BC. So give the drug addicts more drugs is a solution. And you know that you can buy anything in downtown Vancouver legally. How does that work? And here's the crime rate in Canada. The Liberals are in power, crime rate's right up there. Conservatives get in power, it goes way down, and it goes right back up. Bill C-75 is a catch and release thing that's going on, and they're not keeping our criminals in jail.
I think the biggest security threat to Canada is China.
We're heartened by the leadership of President Xi Jinping and the speed with which our relationship has progressed in recent months. I believe the progress that we have made in the partnership sets us up well for the new world order.
So I want to ask you how we get from, in 8 months, like if you go back there, we'll just look at the dates.
I think the biggest security threat
April
to
17th
Canada
to
is China.
January 15th.
And finally, we are creating.
I think the biggest security threat to China.
And finally, we are creating a new category for skilled military recruits to attract highly skilled foreign military applicants. Eligible recruits with a job offer from the Canadian Armed Forces, including doctors, nurses, pilots, can be invited to apply for permanent residence. They will be subject to the same security and all military requirements. This new category.
All right. So,
just retarded.
how do we go from being China's our biggest enemy in April, and we're negotiating a business deal with them in January to change our whole political system? There's no explanation of what a new world order is. And he says that all of a sudden now we're business partners. He said that they're our biggest enemy, and then 7 or 8 months, they're our business partners. So what does Mr. Carney say in his book about the New World Order? He said on page 272, there should be a social credit system. Freedom will be redefined. What do you think of that? Government will control every part of your life. You will own nothing. Business will serve politics. Your money will be tracked. Markets must be morally correct. Experts will replace democracy. Institutions must serve the World Economic Forum, and financial decisions will be judged by climate politics. So this is in Mr. Carney's book. This is what his definition of the New World Order is. This didn't start just recently. Keith went into detail about our identity, so I'm not going to go into it. We've established that we have a core identity. This is our Prime Minister who said in 2015, there's no core identity, no mainstream in Canada, and consequently that makes us the first post-national state. New World Order. This is 2015. What does that mean? New World Order, post-nation, means after you're a nation. It means no borders. It means globalist government. It means that your rulers are somewhere else, globalists. You have no interaction with your politicians because you cannot, because they may be in another continent. And that's what he said. And here are the steps towards that. Oh, our Chief Justice, just in case you didn't believe me, says that existence of Canada's borders is discrimination. This is step one. In 1954, there was a statute in the Criminal Code of Canada that said it was illegal for media to lie to the public. However, in 2019, they changed that. C-39 was voted on to make it legal for them to lie to the public, and I want to understand, if you can help me out, why would the government want to lie to you? Like, why would the government want to lie to its own people? So they could remain criminals and not get caught, so they continue to do the bad things that they're doing with a hidden agenda. But there's no other reason why they would want to lie to you. So how is it that they changed the law? And of course, the media didn't scream their heads off, because what happened at the same time? Justin gave them $700 million, right? Remember that? I remember it clearly. And I wasn't even involved in politics in those days. I said, how the heck is it possible that a federal government is going to give media $700 million and prop them up, and that we could ever expect media to do what they're supposed to do, which is report on the government? And that was the beginning of the creation of, what do they call that if that's happening in communist countries? Propaganda. That's step one, control the message. That's the ring that controls all the rings. Step two, now I get in trouble over this slide, but I'm not backing down off of it, because I don't care if he said it or not. His actions will prove that he means it. Nobody can say either way, so I'm sticking with it. But here I want you to understand something. I'm not mad at the immigrants. Keith went through detail on why we should want to be the way we were before, and that's what they came here for. We came here, they came here for a country that they don't have to worry about who they worship, what they say, and if they work hard enough, they can create a very good life for themselves that will extend into the next generation and the generation after that. That's what the Canada I grew up in was. The very concept of a nation founded by European settlers is offensive to me. Old stock white Canadians are an unpleasant relic and quite frankly replaceable, and we will replace them. So what does he do? 15 million immigrants into Canada since 2015, and a lot of them don't go home. Understand that. They're looking for somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 million of them now. So just understand what the working population of Canada is, with 45 million people, which I would say a third of it are old. So that would be half of what our actual working population is. That would add to that. And this year they approved 1.94 temporary resident applications for Canada. Now I just want you to understand something. How many people are there in Edmonton? Million, million and a half? You would have to build an Edmonton with its infrastructure and all the services it provides to accommodate these people every year. It's not sustainable. And I'm not mad at the immigrants, I'll repeat that. I'm mad at our government for bringing these people in and making things. What does it do to our system? It destabilizes our system. And that's part of the deal. Peter Sutherland, who works for the UN, said this: we must use migration to turn the English people into a minority in England. This will allow us to undermine the identity of the native English and import a new majority that will end the very idea of England. This is critical for globalism to take hold of England. This is in 2006 or 7, somewhere there. So this is a plan that they've had all along. There's the paper by the United Nations. It's a 177-page paper called Replacement Migration. And in Canada, in North America, 8 of the top 10 fastest growing cities are here. Of all those countries there up on the top, from 2000 to 2024, they grew 5%. Canada, in the same period of time, grew 35%. Canada's international student program overwhelmed by fraud. Mr. Carney just allocated $20 to $25 million to pay for the entire bill for foreign students to come here. That'd be over 200 kids. And now here, this slide, I put this slide here for a purpose. United Nations say that the ideal population for Canada is 100 million. Okay? So, the Indian High Commissioner suggests that Canada should increase its Indian population by 60 million people. So I don't care if that's an Indian population or any European population or anything. What happens to your population of Canada if you have 40 million people and they import 60 million more? You become them, right? There's no way around that. And that's what they're saying is the ideal population for Canada. All right, Canada's 30, that's just step 2. This is step 3. We're the most taxed nation in the world, period. We pay more for taxes than for food, clothing, and housing combined. And there they are. 33 taxes. And guess what? They're trying to give you a paid-for house tax. I don't know what they're calling it. But they said, I read this the other day, honest to God, it said that 85% of seniors in Canada are okay with having to pay taxes for their paid-for house. I don't believe it. Propaganda, right? Smooth the path. So they're taxing you on everything. Estate taxes out of this world. You can't even hand your money to your kids which after you earn it, and that's your after-tax dollars. So they're trying to keep you broke because we're the highest tax nation in the world, and you can't give it to your kids, and they're going to tax you after you retire when you're no longer working so that you can't afford to pay the taxes, and maybe they could get your house, the way I see it. Inflation, that's the next step. Now, I don't know if you understand this, but if you double the money supply, the money halves in value. So, in my own store, I'll explain something to you that makes this very clear. Say in 2015, if you had $60 in the bank, you could buy 2 boxes of Remington Core-Locked 180 grain rifle shells. 3 and 4 years later, they double the money supply. That same box of ammo costs $60. That's a real-life example. That's what inflation does. It halves the value of your money, so you can buy this much product with it, twice as much product in 2015 as you could in, say, 2020. So look at the deficits. Now, our government continues to run deficit budgets. Carney's predicting $100 billion a year for the next 4 years. And they understand what that's doing to you. And what would you do if you were a business person or a mortgage, or you wanted to buy a mortgage, and you borrowed the money, and you knew you had to pay it back? So the logical thing is you would increase production and try to increase your profitability. But our federal government does what? Gives us carbon taxes, 6-fold increase in carbon tax, emission caps, to stop our industry from growing. And they're doing that on purpose. They know what they're doing. And they're pumping $33 billion into bureaucracy instead of building a $25 to $30 billion pipeline through the coast of BC that would generate $25 billion a year in income. So $33,000 million is they're increasing the bureaucracy. 33,000 million. So let's break that down to $100,000 a year jobs. 33 times 10. 33 times 100, actually. So they're creating how many jobs there for that $33 billion? 30,000? And how's that helping you? How's that helping us? Makes them more dependent on the government. But what happens to your money? It goes to pay bureaucrats instead of increasing production. I love this slide. My favorite slide. They will not let us have a boat that brings or delivers oil come to the west coast of Canada because they said it's against the Green New Deal laws. However, that very same boat goes down to St. Lawrence or to New Brunswick and delivers 1 million barrels of oil a day from a foreign government at $100 per barrel per day. That's $100 million a day that we spend somewhere else. So I just want you to understand something. Why are they not buying 1 million barrels of oil a day from Alberta? We send them $13.5 billion a year in transfer payments. we'd be better off to send them oil, right? We'd be better off to send them oil. But our government has a built-in customer that needs 1 million barrels of oil a day, and just, you know, I'm a business guy, so this is the way I would look at this. I would say, you know what, our government could own that part of the oil patch. And instead of just collecting royalties on it, we could get the entire thing, because that's a built-in customer. Our own people. Why are our own people not buying from us? Is a question. And look at this. 1 million barrels of oil a day would increase our production by somewhere in the neighborhood of 20%. 5% of production is 40,000 jobs. It would increase our GDP for 5% by $20 billion. That's the consequence of not selling Quebec our own oil. It costs us somewhere in the neighborhood of 80,000 jobs for the whole country. Why isn't China concerned about climate change? Because they already have a communist government. The carbon tax has cost Canadians billions of dollars over 5 years, hurting the economy while reducing CO2 emissions by 11.9 gigatons. And China produces 11.9 gigatons of CO2 every day and a half. So my theory is, if they get serious about climate change, I will too. Because this is ridiculous. And where does the coal come from? Here. Which is the only port in North America that ships coal? Vancouver. And where does Chinese get all of their coal from? Here. At a discounted rate because it's dirty. What happens to you? What's the direct consequence to you out of Alberta shutting down the cleanest hydroelectric, coal-powered electric generating plant in the world? You pay it for it every month on your transmission distribution charges on your power bill. That's a $4 billion debt that you assumed because they cut that out in Alberta, but yet they're exporting all of this coal to China so that China can burn it every day, and I bet you that blows around the world. Just saying. Australia shipped us liquid natural gas 25,000 kilometers to eastern Canada instead of buying it from Alberta. I just want to know how much diesel or oil that big boat burned on a 50,000 kilometer round trip. And guess who owns the liquid natural gas facility in Australia? Brookfield. Nobody pays carbon tax but us. We're looking at a 6-fold increase in carbon tax at the end of April. That makes our product not affordable. They know that. China, India, USA, Russia, Saudi, none of them pay carbon tax. And if that doesn't convince you, this might. Norway produces 2.1 million barrels of oil a day, and we produce 5 billion barrels of oil a day. We're $100 billion in debt, and they have today a $1.95 trillion US savings fund in Norway. Where'd the money go? I told you we were a colony right off the bat. Where'd the money go? How is it possible that we can produce 2.4, 2.5 times as much or more, and they have a $2 trillion oil fund, and we're $100 billion in coal? Okay, now you got to think big if you want to have a free and independent Alberta, because that's the only thing that's stopping you from having it, is what's going on right here. Now look at this. Understand this is real. This is a possibility. This could be for you. That's Saudi Arabia on the right. They produce 3 things. Oops, let's back up here. They produce 3 things: oil, oil byproducts, and silica. They have the same population as us, and we produce oil, forestry, coal, hydroelectric, natural gas, fisheries, diamonds, copper, nickel, iron ore, aluminum, and silver, and there's no agriculture there. They have sand over there. They don't produce much crop. But however, here, we have the opportunity, like he said, best beef in the world and all kinds of crop. Their national debt is $260 billion. Ours is $2.1 trillion. They pay 0 personal income tax. We pay 40%. They pay 0 sales tax. We pay 13%. Guess what? They get a monthly check from the government. They have no deductions, and they get a monthly check from the government. And look at the difference in what they produce as compared to us. And they get free health care, same as us. Where's the money? Where'd the money go? Well, let's go here. We are first in the world in uranium, first in the world in potash, second in the world in nickel, third in the world in oil, fifth in gold, first in fresh water, and there's no agricultural produce up there either. How are we broke? Right. So there's a decision that we have to make. Are we going to accept this or not? That's where we are. 88% of our produce goes south. We export everything south to the USA. That's the way it already is. What would change in a free and independent Alberta? Well, we would control our own borders. And if we had a pipeline going west, we could actually net probably another $20 to $25 billion is the estimate. Could you imagine how much oil we could be selling right now when the whole rest of the world is in panic because of oil? They're paying $120 US a barrel, and we can't ship any off the West Coast. So I want you to understand something. In a free and independent Alberta, that's our border there. BC ships 70% of the stuff that comes into Port of Prince Rupert and Port of Vancouver across Alberta. So I'm going to ask you a question. We went back to the Confederation thing, and I'm going to say to you, how long would it take to negotiate a deal with BC and tell them, look, we're going to stop every train at the border unless you let us build a pipeline? Because they can't do that now. So here's the funny part. We would landlock BC. All right, so we're going to go through a litany of some really bad bills here. And stay with me. C-293 says that in the case of an emergency, which the government will tell you what that emergency is, the government can come to your farm, seize your land and your herd. Okay? Why is that made law in Canada? To take your property. You will own nothing. It's a precursor to that, and there's going to be many precursors to that here. And then what do? They prove that it's real by murdering 320 ostriches and destroying that legacy from that farm that they've been building their whole lives. C-22, what does it say? They're going to be able to wiretap you without a warrant. Going to be law. It'll be okay, don't worry. You got nothing to hide anyway. Digital ID. Melanie Jolie says in C8, they're going to be able to block you off the internet without due process, and you will have no recourse. I love this one. This is brand new. This is C15. Okay. So now a minister can actually pass laws and not have to pay attention to conflict of interest, Environmental Protection Act, lobbying rules, labor standards, privacy laws, or any of that. So I want to ask you a question. Would that make him a little bit bribable? No rules. It gives them the power of a king. And I want you to pay attention to the first one on the top left and 3 there, conflict of interest. Why is that a concern? Because our Prime Minister already has 103 of them. It is illegal in this country for your business to benefit from a decision that you make as a Prime Minister. It's jailable. He's already got 103 of them. But if he passes a law that says that we can ignore that, that gets them off the hook. And Carney's secured 42 contracts, all have been with Brookfield. Not even a secret. C9 just passed. Is everybody aware of C9? All right, so I'll go through it for a minute. I'll read it. All right, a political entity, the Order in Council, names a group, a hate group. That political entity is a Privy Council, unelected bureaucrats. They're the people that name the hate group. That could be Christians, of course, we'll go there. From there, the members of the group are all guilty by virtue of possession of the symbol. Where Mark Miller, a liberal, in debate, names the Bible and Torah as hate and states that there is no legitimate religious defense. Those legitimate religious defenses were put there in the 70s to protect people, give them their freedom of religion. They took them all out. They said, we'll do the right thing. They want us to trust them to do the right thing. So the group is Christians, Torah Jews, and because he said other religious texts, the Quran. And this enables the government to target the religious individuals as part of the group. Has that ever happened in history? And should we be comfortable with that? This is exceptionally evil, broad, and typical only of communist countries, and there's going to be a couple more that are typical only of communist countries. And here's the problem, it's the forfeiture clause. Now, they debated this forfeiture clause. They tried to get it changed. They tried to get it reworded, but they wouldn't debate it. And they've just passed it without more conversation. It says this. It's an unlimited forfeiture clause. Is it your house? Is it your bank account? Is it your life? You are the person by means of which the offense was committed. And here's what it says. It says it may, in addition to any other punishment imposed, be ordered by the presiding provincial court judge or judge to be forfeited to His Majesty and right of the province in which that person is convicted for disposal. So does that mean move you out of the building, or move you out of the province, or just move you out, period? Historically, they call these kind of bills the permission to create atrocities. It's always made me question how very, very smart people all around the world historically have been trapped into a situation that they saw coming. Like, I mean, a prime example of that is the Jews in Germany. They had 6 years of warning that this stuff was going to happen. It didn't start with gas chambers. They had 6 years of warnings that this was going to happen. And, little known fact, the money that the Germans took from the Jews actually funded 40% of a 6-year war. So they could afford to leave. And we're in the same position now. We have to make decisions to protect ourselves, I believe. And it's an anti-Christian bill that would criminalize quoting Bible passages. All right, another communist thing. Red flag laws. Red flag laws are laws that say that your neighbor can rat you out. So they can say that Keith can say Mitch has guns in his house and I'm not comfortable with it. So they can come to my house and seize my guns without a warrant, and I have to go to the RCMP station and prove that I'm innocent. And they don't have to tell me who said it to them. So how big a step is it to go from there to not having a complaint? Because they don't have to tell you about the complainant. So here's what the problem with this is. This is the first step towards seizing your private property, because guns are private property. And if they set precedent by grabbing anything that you've bought, legally purchased, that means that they can continue to do it for other things. That's the biggest problem with this. Most people in urban Alberta say, well, what do you need a gun for anyways? Well, the most logical reason, and it may come to a surprise to everybody in the room, the reason you need a gun is to protect yourself from government. That is the real reason you need a gun. Go away. A well-regulated militia is being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That happened after a war. And read this part. and pay attention to this, necessary for the security of a free state. So if you cannot protect your home, do you have freedoms? 100% no. If you cannot protect yourself, do you have freedoms? What happens, and this sticks in my mind, my dad was 80 years old, and he had some really questionable guys living across the back alley, and he was scared every night, so he had a shotgun right beside his bed. Because an 80-year-old doesn't fight a 6'4", 275-pound 30-year-old. And as a consequence, he was scared every single night, and they weren't moving. All right, we're going to finish up here. GDP, 1.4%, the lowest in the industrialized world. You cannot do that unless you try. There's no way you can do that unless you try, with everything we have here. Mr. Carney hands the keys over to, or Mr. Trudeau hands the keys over to Mr. Carney because he can't account for his $400 million theft from the Green Slush Fund. Have you heard anything about it? You know what Mr. Carney said after he got elected? Well, that was then, don't worry about it. $85.9 billion in investments left. Why? Because they know what's going on. They can't make money here. We've taxed the hell out of our oil production, which is mainly what that is, so that they can't produce oil and make money. So they left. How does that affect you? We looked at that other slide and said how many jobs it costs you when investment leaves Alberta. Mr. Carney pledged $4.3 billion to the Ukraine. 2 days later, Brookfield got a contract for $4.3 billion to rebuild the Ukraine. All right, here we are, UBI. 2 slides to go. What's UBI? Universal Basic Income. I'm just going to tell you one thing about UBI that I want you to be very conscious of. It's $2,000 a month for every person in the country, 17 or over. What's the conditions to be able to collect UBI? You have to sign away your right to own property. That's what UBI, that's what the condition is. All right. I want you, this came out today. Let's talk about this. This is Nenshi. He said, we believe in Alberta, and this is the NDP, and we believe in Canadian energy and the good jobs it creates. We believe in more pipelines and reducing emissions. We believe in strong public services and strong jobs-driven economy to help pay for them. This is what we are fighting for every day. So, the good news is the NDP are in favor of an independent Alberta. Right? So, I'm telling Mr. Nenshi right now, call me. Like we're on the same page here. Right? I want all of that. Anyways, all right. Corruption's a problem. We know that. We have to put up with it or don't put up with it. This is how this is going to work. It's very easy for me. And it shouldn't be. Numbers is how we're going to win this. We have numbers. There's very few of them. We're going to have to decide that we want Saudi Arabia's deal. We don't pay any taxes and we get a monthly check from the government. And that's doable if we do it. And if anybody's ever been in a fight of any kind, I'm going to promise you one thing about them. You don't know how they're going to end up going in. But if we don't, then we accept this. So how we find our way out of this is very simple. We have to sign people up. This has to be too big to rig. It's that simple. So I'm going to explain to you a couple things about where we are, where we're going, and what's going to happen. So the first thing I want you to understand is we're not quite there for the signature threshold that we need to hold a referendum. But I'm also going to share with you that we will get there. So there will be a referendum. But that's first step. The second step is everybody's telling me that we should announce the number. And I'm going to ask you all a question, because lots of canvassers in the room. If I give you a number, are you going to go out there and get more? Because not having, yeah, good. Because we're going to start the next part of this right after we get what we need to call a referendum for independence, which we will get. But the second part of this is we have to get these numbers of people to support. Then we have to have the conversation with people, because if we don't, we've got a 6-month window to do this, and I'm going to tell you what, the time is going to go by quickly, and we're not going to get another chance. You will have a chance to make the most important financial decision you've ever made, and you will have a chance to make the most important social decision you will ever make too. This is all wrapped up together. They're here for what we have. We just have to decide not to let them have it. So please sign up to Canvas. Continue to do that. Get your name in. Get your low-hanging fruit, your friends, your family, people that you can talk to that I can't reach. That's the path to success. And then get them to come out and vote. That'll be your job. All right. So, couple SFA, State Free Alberta, is going to morph into the next level, and we're going to fight this for 6 months. So we're not going to lose any of the things that we've built. We're going to continue to the next level, all organized and ready to go based on what we've been just doing. So just understand that. All right, with that, I thank you, everybody. Have a good day, and thanks you for listening. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start with the panel discussion right away. We're doing a Q&A, and what we're going to do is a lineup right here. And so you're going to line up right here. And the people who get to come to the front of the line are the people who oppose independence or are undecided or haven't yet signed the petition. You get to come to the front of the line. All right, so you raise your hand at me, and we'll organize you right here. So we're gonna have a lineup here. Now, even if you support independence, but you have a clarifying question, we welcome you in this lineup as well. So, check 1, 2. Okay. So I got a mic for you guys to share.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, let's get that lineup started here. There's got to be some people with questions.
If you don't ask questions, I'm going to tell you lawyer jokes. This guy comes up to me because he knows I'm a lawyer, and he says, how much does it cost to ask a lawyer a question? I said $700. What's your next question?
Very good. So we're ready to start with the questions? 30 seconds or less.
30 seconds or less, okay. Born and raised Albertan here, actually living in Sturgeon County right here. One thing I can't help but notice is how ethnically non-diverse the crowds happen to be, both at the legislature and here. It doesn't really reflect the province as a whole in terms of the demographics. How do we get the East Indians, the Chinese, the Vietnamese, the natives, how do we get them on board? Like, we need them, we need their signatures. This is not about race, it's not a racist movement. There's a lot of white people in this room.
Well, don't be deceived. You know, I was on, was it Friday night? Thursday. Friday night I was in an Uber. And it was an East Indian guy. Him and his wife are nurses, got 2 young kids. And I waited till we were about 2 or 3 blocks from the destination. We were talking about different things. And then I asked him what he thought about Alberta independence. And he was kind of like, well, what do you think about it, you know? And I said, well, I think, you know, I think it's great. He had no idea who I was. And he said, yeah, me and my wife fully support it, and all of our friends do too. We think Canada's lost its way, he explained. It's not the country that his parents came here for. He was born here. His parents were immigrants from India. And he talked about the future for his kids. Him and his wife have a 4-year-old and an 11-year-old. And I was, he wanted to know what's involved. He hadn't signed yet, but he wanted to. So I don't think it's necessarily representative of the support, would be my short answer.
Thank you for the question. Next question.
I spent close to 21 years in the Canadian Forces defending Canada as a country. I am at this point undecided personally. I have a lot of family and friends across the country, and I'm concerned about their welfare if we don't give them money to help them with some of their programs, excepting for Quebec, because they have lots of minerals that they could produce. I'm concerned about my family, friends, and brothers and sisters of the military across the country.
What's your question?
Well, that's a tough question for me to answer because most of that money never goes to the citizens right now. So my biggest concern is if the money stayed here, then we could take care of everybody. It'd be quite a bit easier if government wasn't siphoning it somewhere else. Because you saw that 50% of the money that, according to even Stats Canada, that the government spends, that the government has, they don't complete their projects, so it's moving to another place. So in the event that if Alberta left, then we could set the golden standard for honest governments. And if the money that was actually collected stayed there, they would be able to take care of themselves very easily if they followed our example. And you know what, honestly, that's, I think, is the biggest problem for me, is the fact that all this money is going all over the place, and it's not staying with the citizens of Alberta or staying with the citizens of Canada, in actual fact.
Let me add to this. You know, one of the things that, and this is a great point that this gentleman raises because it's something that I've thought quite a bit about, and I just want to give it a little bit more precision, is that right now we send all this surplus wealth that we create to Ottawa. And we know, you know, the classic, they send $30 million to Vietnam to support diversity and LGBT training for peasant rice farmers, you know, like stuff like that. Instead of maybe doing a supplemental grant program to Nova Scotia because they need a new hospital. In other words, we can become the adults in the room. Where the rest of the country's not going anywhere, and either are we. What we're changing is the power structure. We're changing the relationships. We'll have a bilateral trade agreement with the rest of the country to allow the free, you know, someone from Ontario came after me on Twitter and said, you guys just like shut her all down and, you know, take all your stuff. And I'm like, have you ever heard of Line 5? Like, we supply you with your fuel to Sarnia, and you're not flying out of Pearson without us. But anyway, but in the same way that we'll be able to have a bilateral trade agreement, we'll also be able to decide which provinces we're going to support and which programs we're going to support. So our friends and family that are in other parts of the country, rather than the money being squandered and going off to reward Brookfield offshore somewhere or China or somewhere else, we'll be able to target it to other Canadians and restore some Canadian values.
To the gentleman that was just up here, thank you for your service. Sorry, I could hear myself a lot louder than most people. I'm asking this on behalf of my brother. He was here, he had to leave, but I thought it was a great question worth asking. So if the Canadian government refuses to negotiate in good faith with, and Alberta declares its independence, how does Alberta go about getting the funding that they would have negotiated from Canada in the first place? In regards to, say, like the pension money or buying the parks and so on and so forth.
Okay, so pension, you remain a Canadian citizen, and Canada Pension is going to owe you your pension forever. And because we pay more into Canada Pension than we take back, it'll give us the opportunity to create our own pension, like Quebec has, and pay our seniors more money than they're actually getting now. The actual goal is this. We're talking about doubling pension and old age security, because we can, right off the bat. And the other thing we're talking about doing is cutting your federal income tax out, which is money that we never see. So we want to make every Albertan better off. So that's the goal. So we'll have $27 to $35 billion excess after we do that even, to invest in ourselves and do other things. And the federal government should owe us the $400 billion that they owe seniors, but I doubt we'll ever see it. That's just my thought. So we'll have to negotiate that somewhere else. But I'll rest assured we'll take care of our seniors.
I always assume, and maybe it's because I'm a litigator, that the other party's not going to do what they should. So if my client says, well, what are we going to do if the other party doesn't do what they should? And I say, I don't know. And that wasn't Mitch's answer. But I mean, that cannot be our answer. So I think, and this needs to be more fleshed out in greater detail. But the reality is, we're going to be placing a value on the national parks because we're going to keep them. They're within our boundaries. We're going to be placing the value on the 4 military bases, which are substantial assets and other things. Now, just assume for argument's sake it becomes a wash. In other words, the amount they owe for pensions, the amount they owe for other things that they owe to Alberta as part of these negotiations is a wash. First of all, if that happens to be the case, we've got tremendous leverage. And remember, we're not going to stop our economy. The economy is going to keep going. We're going to keep generating wealth. What's going to change is we're not shipping that wealth to Ottawa, so we can immediately put it to our seniors, to our veterans, to the other services that we have to deliver. And not only that, we're going to be taking this knee off our neck, this constraint, this artificial restriction. Just the savings in carbon taxes alone is going to be a huge amount of money. And we're going to be able to negotiate from strength, access to Tidewater. $8 billion worth of goods come from British Columbia through our highways and rail system through Alberta. Everything from agricultural products, wine, to mining, to forestry, and so on. And all the intermodal stuff that they buy in Walmarts and Canadian Tire stores that come off the ships from Asia in Vancouver and Prince Rupert that end up east come through Alberta. We're going to have a negotiating position with them like we've never had before. So our ability to provide for our people will be significant. When you look at the population size, go and do this analysis. I did it on a graph in one of the posts I did on X. If you look at the reserves that Saudi Arabia has, and you look at their population to reserves, oil reserves. If you look at Kuwait and everybody else, it's all like an inch or half of an inch on this chart. Alberta's like 3 inches. In other words, there is no, if we are unconstrained in our ability to apply our hard work and get our resources to market, we will be the wealthiest nation in the world. We won't have income taxes, and our workers will be paying less into the pension program, and our seniors will be getting more out of it.
Just a quick one for you. You're talking about negotiating in good faith, which we all believe is not going to go well. I've had a lot of questions talking to people as I've talked about the independence movement, and one of them that came to me was quite interesting. How do you think Ottawa's going to receive it, and what are they going to want us to share in part of the current deficit? The federal deficit's sitting at, I believe, 1.2 trillion, and our percentage, 2.1, okay, I got it backwards, and our percentage is quite high, and that's, like, even that $40 billion a year would take us about 15 years to pay off.
Well, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. There's lots of different ways this can be characterized. It's no different than when I'm involved in a complex litigation file. The first thing the parties do is they try and apply precision to their positions and substantiate it. And then after that, it becomes a horse trade. It's all big number, big number, big number, big number, back and forth till you agree. And there's a number of ways to approach this. And one is, do we even owe any of the deficit? And if we do, how much? And on what terms are we prepared to pay it back over what time period? So it's not a given that it's just simple math. It's a complex number. We have to be able to apply a rationale to it, and I think we'll be able to do that. Again, look at how much Alberta has contributed to the rest of the country for so long.
Hello. My question is, I've heard a lot of people talk about the fact that if we were to separate, if we were to win the referendum and separate, the other provinces would have to essentially approve it through a constitutional change. Is that correct, or are they just full of a bunch of bullshit?
So if we get to the point where the parties are in a good faith negotiation, there would need to be an amendment to the Constitution. And it's pretty simple. You just convert it to a Word document, do search, replace, anywhere you see Alberta, delete, and there you go, it's done. So you'd just be removing Alberta from the Constitution. That's it. And it wouldn't be the amending formula because of the nature of the amendment and the wording of the Supreme Court of Canada decision from 1998. It would have to be all of the provinces. So when you have negotiations with parties, and this happens all the time in whatever transaction you do or settlement, there's always, in contract, there's always a further assurances clause where the parties say, this is our deal, and if there's something else I need to do to make the deal go through and sign some other paper or deliver some other document, I will. So as part of the negotiations, if the federal government and the provinces do truly end to good faith negotiations, one of the clauses in the agreement we reach will be they all agree that the Constitution shall be amended by deleting all references to Alberta. So, but if we don't have good faith negotiations, we'll be taking the other path.
This is on behalf of the legal gun owners in Alberta. In October, we will become criminals for those that have not surrendered their guns, but we won't be a sovereign nation at that time. How do you address that?
Well, I hope we will be sovereign, just about. But we've been talking to the Premier about this for literally 2 years. Okay, we understood this is coming. They extended the amnesty here 6 or 8 months ago. And as a consequence to that, the Premier's position on this is they're not going to make the RCMP enforce that. But here's the problem. The problem is that even if they're not enforcing it, on November 1st, the federal government will make you a criminal because you're breaking a gun law. Then they will take your PAL away from you. And then you will not have the ability to actually own a gun because, first of all, you're a criminal, you can't have a PAL. And then if you're a criminal, of course, you can't have a passport. So I explained that to the Premier in very clear, as clear as I could, and she understood it. And our position is we need an Alberta gun license, even if they have to take it to court to contest it. So in the meantime, we'll create an avenue for our gun owners to keep their guns and not become criminals by creating our own Alberta gun license. I don't believe, Saskatchewan's doing something a little different too. I'd have to look into what they're doing there. But what we need here is an Alberta gun license so you can keep that gun, your legally acquired property, because in actual fact, 9213 of the Constitution says that the province is responsible for civil rights and property rights. So our government, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm fortunate to be sitting beside a lawyer here, I'll let you kick in here, Keith, we should be able to defend our position, and with luck, it should take a year or two, and by then we could be gone. That would be the way I would look at it.
My short answer is it's going to be a mess. They seem so determined to do this, even though it's just their, and this is one of the things we're witnessing, is that even why, Carney tries to fake us out and make it seem like he's not the green zealot that Gabot and others were, but we're now seeing he is. And it's the radical wing of the Liberal Party based in Quebec, and they're the only ones that are pushing this gun control. It has no support anywhere else. So it's a mess, and it's yet another of the many reasons why we need to vote for independence.
I have two very quick yes or no questions, if I may. On July 22nd, 1948, Newfoundland and Labrador entered into Canadian Confederation with a majority of 52.34% in favor of joining Canada. Would it be a fair and pressing legal argument that Alberta not need to exceed the same percentage in order to leave Canada?
Yes.
That's the best news of the day. My second question is for Mitch. Were you able to contact the publisher of the St. Albert Gazette and schedule an interview with the newspaper?
No, I didn't try to. So they can reach me anytime they want, basically go through Stay Free Alberta. I generally don't decline interviews.
Okay, did you know, this is an email between myself and the publisher of the Alberta Gazette, and the line was, the Gazette is planning to make contact and with representatives of Stay Free Alberta as part of our continuing coverage of the petition campaign and the referendum if one is scheduled as a result. I have the name of the gentleman, the phone number, and all the contacts. If I could grab a minute with you afterwards, that would be awesome.
Well, wait a minute. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude, sir, but come on. Really? Like, every story in the Gazette has been completely one-sided. They know how to find me. They know how to find Mitch. They're not interested in balanced coverage. None of these guys are. That's not how this works. You just described, with all due respect, and sorry for coming at you, but this really hits a button with me. That's the old Canada. That doesn't exist anymore. I used to do media interviews all the time. I don't anymore because I know if I say something compelling, intelligent, that's damaging to the government's position, it never gets printed, it never gets published, because the editor says, look, we don't make money anymore. Do you want me to have to lay you off? If I publish this story quoting Mr. Sylvester, Mr. Williams, or Mr. Wilson, I'm going to get a phone call. We're not going to get our funding from the government, and we're going to have to shut down. We do not have a free press.
My question is about the injunction that's going to be coming up in the next couple of weeks. What's the procedure and how is it going to work out for, will it be a one-time decision? Or will it take a couple of weeks to get a decision from the judges that decide what happens?
Did you understand it?
I think, sorry, it was a little overlap with the clapping. I think you're asking about the injunction application? Yeah, so the First Nations, a few First Nations chiefs have brought an injunction application. They're seeking to, it's not clear whether they're going to try and block Mitch from further supporting collections. It's not clear whether the injunction they're seeking would apply to the canvassers, or whether the injunction would apply to Albertans, or whether it would just apply to Elections Alberta. Jeff Rath and Eva Chipiak are fighting hard. They're very capable. I'm helping them in the background. This, as Jeff Rath has so eloquently pointed out, if the court is to interfere with this democratic process, the right of petition is one of the oldest forms of democracy. It's how citizens articulate views to their elected officials and those who rule over them. As Jeff's pointed out, if the court grants this injunction, it would be like telling Albertans they can't write to their MLA. So we don't know what's going to happen. The judge has said some incredibly strange things in the preliminary hearings that suggest she may have prejudged the matter. Hopefully, once all the legal arguments in, she doesn't grant the injunction. But Mitch has some plan A and plan Bs if the injunction is granted to ensure that the will of the people are not interfered with and that we can stay on track to have our referendum.
So, while we're on that subject, if they grant that injunction, we're going to have a mother of a rally. Just telling you right now. We're going to look for 100,000 people to come to the ledge. Telling you that right now. That's already a plan.
This guy has a question.
30 seconds or less.
Okay.
Put it on your chin.
Oh, yeah. Speak. Could I shake both of your hands?
Yeah, anytime you want.
Go. Go on the stage.
Give him a round of applause. We really appreciate young people being a part of this movement. His dad is here with a comment.
Oh, so Torrn's my oldest of 5, and he comes out with the canvassing every time, no matter the weather or anything. He acts as my security for filming any agitated Forever Canadians. So without him, I wouldn't be able to do it safely.
Great. Good job.
I do. So I have a question. It's more for most of the people that have been asking me when signing up. Is their question is about election integrity. They're concerned that there won't be enough oversight with the actual referendum and of the validation of the votes.
So as far as oversight at the election, is that what you're asking?
For the referendum, people are concerned that
for
their
the
vote won't
referendum
count.
question in October.
Yeah, they're concerned their vote won't count because they're worried about election interference.
Okay, so we've actually been working on this for a long, long time. So back in Take Back Alberta days, when I was a director with Take Back Alberta, when we were basically looking for a leader, because we had just fired Jason Kenney, one of the things that there was three things that we looked at that we thought were very important if we were going to give anybody our support. No more tabulators was the first one. That was top of our list. So that'll make this election much fairer because our government has since taken initiative and canceled tabulators. So that was the most important one. Our Premier has just addressed something that will help immensely by saying this is going to be a paper ballot. And the other thing is that we're going to have people watching at every poll, scrutineers at every poll, which we won't have any problem finding if they allow us to do it. And if they don't allow us to do it, we'll be very vocal about it and making darn sure that they understand that if that goes against us and they don't allow scrutineers at every poll, it's just going to be an ugly situation, so we might as well just do it right the first time. So that's the way we feel, and I don't think we'll have any problem getting thousands and thousands and thousands of scrutineers. I really don't.
Thank you. Just on that note, advance polls and chain of custody, with regards to the October 19 referenda, will there be advance voting or no? Think not? Okay, I agree with that because I'm concerned about chain of custody after advance voting. So thank you. That makes me feel a bit better. What's your question?
So first of all, I'm an Indigenous business owner here, a father as well. Originally from Nova Scotia, moved to Alberta for better opportunities about 12 years ago now. Worked my butt off here, financially independent. I don't depend on nobody for nothing. I'm here to support this movement because it's not the Canada I grew up with here. You know what I mean? I grew up, very modestly, worked my butt off, and I think that's, the backbone of Alberta, which I love here, right? And so my point is that I've been speaking to a lot of other Indigenous people, and I see your movement here doesn't really, it's not seen here, right? That you're capturing that audience. What are you guys going to do to capture more of that Indigenous vote? Are you guys going to go to the Indigenous communities, some of the Métis First Nation communities? How are you guys going to, try to bring them on board? And what will happen to Indigenous sovereignty if Alberta becomes its own state?
So some of our most active canvassers are First Nations and Métis. Many have signed, and it's, again, there appears to be a lot of support and dissatisfaction among our First Nations, both on reserve and off reserve, with how they've been treated. And I think many see them as this is an opportunity for renewal. But one of the things I emphasize repeatedly, and it looks like I'm going to have to do it every day until October, which is every Albertan voter, whether you're First Nations or not, has the right to sign a petition. You don't have to. Every Alberta voter, whether you're First Nations or not, has the right to vote in a municipal, provincial, and federal election. If the vote is for independence, then the decision-making for each First Nation goes to the First Nation, and whatever decision-making processes they have as a community, they will exercise. They can decide to have absolute status quo, nothing changing at all. But the thing I emphasize is it is only the First Nations that can make this decision. All of the court challenges, all of the left-wing critics, all of the law professors all assume that independence is going to impose something on the First Nations and forcibly take something away from them. That is not true. It is only, the treaties were signed, the origin of the land ownership is from the treaties. I believe in honoring agreements. Alberta will honor the agreement. And if the First Nations want to keep their treaty partner, the federal government, fine, like the government of Canada, no problem. If you want it to be the new government of Alberta, no problem. And if each individual reserve decides there's some that they want to enter into a brand new relationship, no problem. So it's a complete red herring in my view, all this alarmism that's going on. I see it as a huge opportunity for First Nations to renew their relationship and try something new, because clearly the status quo doesn't work.
Okay, so one final comment there. So we called all 48 nations for a meeting in Ponoka Thursday of last week. We called them 3 times, got receptionists to answer the phone. None of them came. And the other thing that happened is we had 2 actual visitors that wanted to see the process, our Aboriginal ladies, and we had a meeting with them. And I'm going to quote one of the girls. She said, if the federal government continues down this path and they're taking everything away from Albertans, what would make Aboriginal people think that they would honor their treaty? And I believe we would.
Hey, just wondering, do you think Elections Alberta has a plan or even the ability to get ballots, referendum ballots to Albertans living overseas, specifically the 600 or so military personnel based Edmonton sends to Latvia every half year?
Well, I can't comment on Elections Alberta at all, so I'm going to let Keith do it.
Well, Elections Alberta has been doing the worst thing that a chief electoral officer and his office can do, which is they appear to be picking teams and picking sides, and that's very troubling. Their conduct is just over the top, highly inappropriate. They're behaving in a manner that brings the administration of justice into disrepute. I'm duty-bound to call that out, and I just did. So I don't know what they're going to do, but one of the things I know that the Premier has signaled is she wants this process to be robust, and she wants it to be exceptionally fair. That's why Mitch Sylvester, as the petitioner, is going to have the right to select scrutineers to ensure that we can trust the process. But you raise a great point that we've got to make sure that anybody that we can think of who would want to vote yes, to make sure the process allows them to vote yes.
Okay, I'll try. Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say thank you guys so much. It's freedom of speech exercised here, and you guys are donating a lot of your time and stuff, so I really appreciate that from you guys. I have 3 quick questions. If the petition results are very high, would it increase the likelihood of good faith negotiations, in your opinion?
If the turnout and the vote in favor of separation and independence is very high on October 19th, will it increase the likelihood of good faith negotiations? I think it will. But I just, man, like they're not going to let, they love our money. They love how hard we work. They love how we keep giving it to them, no matter how much abuse they impose upon us. This is going to be an interesting ride. And what they've miscalculated is the United States and the other countries, and Carney renewing the doctrine of unilateral recognition as he did in September of last year.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. And then, thank you. And then the other 2 quick thoughts just on, I think you might have addressed it, but import-export negotiating power against neighboring provinces to still reach global markets. And then would they have military recourse if we were to just declare independence and they did not show up to negotiate?
Well, I mean, we have to be realistic. First of all, I mean, I'll be silly here. it'd be really important that we all get eye protection because they might shoot us with tampons, I guess. But assuming they could get some of the equipment started, yeah. Mitch said he's happy he didn't say that, but he does think it's funny. I don't think I need to finish the analysis. I mean, come on. Our natural trading, how did Alberta form? We formed, after the fur trade phase in the late 1880s, after the Civil War, there was a huge surplus of cattle in Texas. That's where they made all the cowboy movies, right? And the big cattle drive started. And they drove them up into the plains of Colorado and Nebraska, and they kept on going through Montana, and they kept on coming up to Alberta. So the founding fathers in southern Alberta, the Copperthorns and others, are all, a lot of them and others came from the United States. Our natural trade route has always been north-south with the United States. We are more culturally aligned with the United States than Eastern Canada. That's why they call Alberta, Texas North, for among reasons. We're the Calgary Stampede. I mean, come on, right? Also, too, the U.S. Pentagon's military doctrine to protect the United States ever since the early 1950s. Tom Marazzo from the Freedom Convoy, Captain Marazzo, explained this to me, that he learned this in military college back in the day when he was with the forces, Canadian Forces, is that the Americans have never been worried about defending the Pacific and Atlantic from an invasion. They've always been worried about the North. So their military doctrine that's been in all their binders on the shelves since the 1950s has planned for an invasion from through the North, through the Arctic, with either Russia or China or both. And all of their doctrines are to rush forces into Alberta and Saskatchewan to fight them here rather than in Montana. So I guess if some other threat showed up, there you go.
I have a sort of a two-part question, but I'll ask
I
the first.
can't hear him. Could you put that close to the speaker?
I have a bit of a two-part question, but I'll ask my first question first. If Alberta separates, will others follow?
What?
Other provinces.
Oh, well, I'm going to Saskatchewan on the third weekend in May to do a conference with the Saskatchewan Prosperity Project. First day in Saskatoon, the next day in Regina. They've actually basically copied the Alberta Prosperity Project. So will they follow us if they have an opportunity? But they have different rules than us. So understand this, they have to declare independence first on their own, and then before they can become independent, of course, and before we can negotiate whether or not we would unite with another part of Canada to become a country.
Do I have the time for another question? Or the other? If Alberta does leave, will the rest of Canada fall because they don't have...
I'd be surprised. I think here's the way I see this playing out, honestly. I'm assuming we're going to win. If we win, when we win, we're going to have a migration problem. We're going to have people from all over Canada that want to move here. I really believe that. And I really believe that we're also going to we'll be fortunate enough to lose people that are on the other side of this. And if they want to go, that will be fine. Then we will become more conservative. But the other thing is that I don't think that the rest of Canada will come until 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road when they see what could be possible for them to do, because I really believe that we're going to build the greatest nation in the world because we have a chance to start from scratch, and how exciting that would be. And we know that we can cure some of the problems that have, most of the constitutions in the world were in the 1800s, early 1900s, so they're 100 and some years old. We have the ability to start with a 2026 constitution and make the rules that suit us, around medical care, around agriculture, around all of that. We could make that all better. So I think we'll be the shining example for the whole world here, actually.
I would just add to that, there's some very strong proponents of Alberta independence who live and work in other provinces. Professor Party's an example. And what I think they're hoping to see is it will be a wake-up call for the rest of the country. As in the analogy in my talk, they've been allowed, these ideologues in Ottawa have been allowed to live recklessly and behave like, juveniles because we've allowed them by sending 20, 30, 40, 50 billion dollars a year to them. When that ends, the rest of Canada is going to have to say, uh-oh, things aren't so good anymore. Maybe we should start electing adults instead of activists.
Hi, thank you for being here and everything. I used to write for community newspapers, so I'm with you, what you said about them. I quit writing for them just because of that reason. So the question is, Quebec right now is having a court case regarding the language law and the notwithstanding clause. And also Carney wants to take over all our laws, so we can't make our own decisions like the Premier and that. What is the solution to that, I guess, is what I'm wondering.
Oh, that's easy. Vote for independence on October 19th.
I knew that one, but what I'm wondering is, what happens if this all goes through before this comes about, before October 19th?
Well, I mean, it'll be a wake-up call that this idyllic Walt Disney-esque Canada that we think back about just doesn't exist. We're in a very, we're the perpetual or the literal boiling frog in a pot, and the laws just keep changing around us, and we just wake up. It's kind of like the dark days of COVID, right? Where you're just like, this is not really happening. They're not really restricting 6 million people from flying. They're not really making people lose their jobs. And it's like, no, it is really happening. And as these laws that Mitch put up, they're real. And we just keep slipping further and further into this authoritarian, centralized control country that Alberta has this opportunity to break free from.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Mitch and Keith, quick question here regarding the Supreme Court of Canada, because they're ruling on Quebec's use of the notwithstanding clause. And if they rule that the notwithstanding clause cannot be used, and similarly, if they rule that that despite what the lower courts said, that the Freedom Convoy was valid and the use of the Emergencies Act completely invalid and illegal and a violation of rights, what do you think the reaction is going to be in terms of what we're trying to do here?
Well, it depends on what jersey you're wearing. If you're a liberal, you're going to be thinking good, because there's if Albertans are mad about it, they'll say good. We got those right wingers pissed off. If you're a person that believes in the principles of democracy and fundamental freedoms, you're going to be mortified. So again, I ran the Charter Challenge on behalf of former Premier Peckford, the last living signature of our charter. I sued the son of the Prime Minister that he negotiated the charter with on behalf of 6 million unvaccinated Canadians who were denied their right of mobility in 2021. And the courts made a mockery of themselves on that. So the consecutive rule of the Liberals and the power that the Prime Minister has to select judges is manifesting itself in the decisions we're seeing.
No, I have nothing to add to that. Keith's kind of in a much better position to answer that than me.
My question is about getting out the vote in October. So Thomas Lukask and Forever Canada has mobilized his petitioners, door knockers to start preparing to get out the vote and prepare in campaign mode. My question is, what are we going to be doing to counter that after the signatures are collected? And what can people in this room do to get involved to help get out the vote in October, aside from talking to friends and talking to people that are on the fence that are not coming to these town halls?
So we're going to start in May We're starting door knocking program in a big way now. So we're going to try and we have 7,000 canvassers. That's the most in the history of Canada by far. Nobody has ever had the kind of participation that this movement has had up to this point. So we're trying to mobilize all of our 7,000 canvassers, of which 2,300 have been trained to knock doors. So as a consequence to that, we're hoping to see some big numbers between now and then. Unfortunately, we're not able to keep that data. So we'll start over again in May, June, July, and use the data that we collect at that particular time so that we can advance this cause and make sure that we get out the vote and do what we need to do to win.
I'll just add a little tip that I heard from someone else. If you have a relation, a family member, a neighbor, a friend, a coworker who is either against or undecided, you've got a number of months to slowly work on them. So don't say, you're an absolute moron for not voting for this. What are you, a communist? Like, that's probably not the best strategy for the undecided. You know, try and find something that you and that person agree on that's maybe wrong with Canada, and just slowly work them towards seeing what you see, little bits at a time. Be patient, have the respectful dialogue. I strongly encourage that. And there's also a number of separate third-party advertisers. We have these goofy rules under the elections legislation. If you're going to promote and pay money and spend money, you got to organize. There's different groups that are forming, and they're just starting. They're grassroots in nature. Mitch and all the different organizations he has are going to be instrumental, but there's other groups too. So there's going to be a lot of things happening.
I heard at an independence event, somebody suggested there should be 20 third-party advertisers supporting the referendum campaign.
I think there will be.
And if there are, and they max out their donations and their spending, that's $12 million to support this campaign. That means a lot of ads. We can change a lot of minds and hearts if we do that.
The Freedom Convoy raised over $23 million in 3 weeks.
So we could do it too.
Thanks, guys. Freedom first. All the rest is just details. And Keith, I can hardly wait to watch the debate between you and Mr. Kenney. That will be... 2 debates in May. That will be totally amazing. My question is, when do you think that white paper will be coming out? I would love to read that.
Current prediction is late May, early June.
Thank you.
I've got a couple of things to say. On my mom's side, we've been here since 1776, and I know what fighting for independence. Now, we've been fighting the Crown, which will never allow you to be richer than them, which is Ottawa. Independence will not be a political fight because you'll lose it. When we're independent, we make the rules as a country, as an independent state here. We determine what we want, not them, because if you want to call it democracy, they will dictate to you. You won't win that one. We're going to win it on independence and what we want. Federalism in this country will never, ever, ever work. It cannot work. It's like Texas. This little flag here, my daughter lives down there. They are independent. Nobody tells them what to do. The feds cannot do that. You'll lose it on fighting their democratic rules. You'll lose. We fight it on independence, what we want. And we determine the rules and regulation. Everybody is to be treated equally. We're not going to build another system of natives and these and these and these. Everybody must be treated equally. That's what I want in this province.
I didn't hear a question, but could you comment on that, about equality of the different races and cultures and backgrounds?
Well, I mean, one of the things we're going to be able to do is develop a constitution that reflects our values.
I just wanted to say thank you so much to you two for all the time and effort that you put in. And I also wanted to make a comment about guns. I gave a hypothesis to Mr. Getson when I went to the gun thing in Gibbons, and I said, okay, I'm a criminal considered by the federal government. I go to BC for a holiday. Am I going to get arrested? They said, don't go to BC. But Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario police forces are not going to be compliant with that law. And I think that's pretty amazing that they're not going to be compliant for it.
Do you believe that?
Well, they said that they weren't going to, so we have to have it on
I
paper.
am going to tell you a secret. I have a decision to make. And the whole problem with that is I don't trust those guys one bit. And I would not, I wouldn't stake my life on the thinking that they're not going to prosecute you after you're a criminal. That would depend on an officer by officer thing, because they're going to be able to pull up your criminal record right there on the spot. I just think, honest to God, I think the Premier has to step up here and do something that's going to help us and protect us. This is a really big deal for Albertans. There may be 100,000 Albertans made criminal November 1st.
The other thing I wanted to say is all these billions of dollars that you're talking about that we are going to have when we have independence, right now we're living in a fiat currency, which means that it's an inflated currency, and you said yourself that it's worth half as much. So are we really going to have all those billions, or is it going to be gold backed?
Well, I think it would be better, we'd be better served to have it petro backed. I mean, really, you know, Norway and Sweden, they have their own currency. I would think that would be the very best path. But in the interim, I think because we trade in US dollars, that I think that's going to be the way it has to be until we can make sure that we can do that. But you know what? That's going to be something for the government to decide. At the time, if it's up to me, I'd love to be able to print our own money based on all the resources that we have. So it would be, you know, probably the strongest currency in the world.
Bonita, maybe just two more.
What is the relationship between Elections Alberta and the federal elections or the federal government to protect the information of the canvassers and the people who are signing these forms, the petition, so that those people, canvassers or the signees, who receive federal benefits, whether they be VAC or anything else, aren't going to be punished like the Freedom Convoy people, where their benefits will get stopped or they start getting reevaluated?
So a few things. First of all, there's no relationships between Elections Alberta and the federal government equivalent. Elections Alberta, the chief electoral officer is appointed by an all-party committee. So they're appointed or removed by an all-party committee. So it's not like someone that the Premier can replace. And I think that makes sense. I just think this one's forgot that they're supposed to be neutral. In terms of the privacy provisions, they're extensive and they're through the whole system. Mitch Sylvester has been very careful in the protocols that his organization has put in, Stay Free Alberta. All canvassers sign a non-disclosure agreement. Anybody who touches has eyes on that petition, and the signatures and the information signs non-disclosure agreements. There's statutory and regulatory protections. The list can never be made public, and after it's counted and verified, it's destroyed. So there's lots of protections legally to ensure privacy and protection of privacy, and Mitch will tell us more.
I just want to make a comment. What you've brought up is the biggest barrier in us collecting signatures, right there. So I want you to understand the fact that it's even conversation should tell you exactly what's happening here. If you are intimidated to sign a petition in your own country that's been free and democratic And it is real. Believe me, I hear it every day. When Jeff and Dennis came out with we're going to get 1 million signatures on this, the reason that they brought that number up is because they didn't spend the last 3 years like I have trying to collect signatures for, first of all, Alberta pension and now this. I totally understand how intimidated people are by that. What astounds me is 350,000 gun owners in Alberta are not rushing to sign this. They're on the worst possible list they could be on. And yet they're not running to sign this because they're scared. And what I'm trying to tell you is it's going to take a little bit of courage to do this. So just understand you're right. And I'm worried about people having the courage to do this, and it's going to be our biggest barrier to succeeding.
Well, I know my name's on a list somewhere, so I signed.
Yeah, I'm on all of the lists. Yep.
So we're going to do 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap it up and have closing remarks.
Yeah, it's unfathomable to me how a half a dozen First Nations chiefs can go in and shut down our petition like this earlier than the time that we had allotted to do this. I just don't understand how this is even possible.
Well, it may not happen, but I'll let Keith handle that. That's his area.
Yeah, it remains to be seen, but as we've seen, the courts have become inherently politicized. This is a politically motivated court application. There's no basis in it or fact in law, as I've explained repeatedly. There's no, and this is at the petition phase. This isn't even at the independence phase. So it's all political gesturing. It seems like it's favor-seeking behavior to please by a few chiefs to please their political masters in Ottawa. I think they've got some explaining to do.
Thank you for what you're all doing. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So we're at our final question, and after this question, I request that you both deliver closing remarks.
Thank you very much for coming out tonight, and I'm glad your voice is heard. Just wondering, I know that we're talking about this right now as a referendum and everything else. What does it look like after that? I mean, that's a question of a lot of concerned citizens, obviously. Are we looking at another Westminster government? What are we looking for down the road? Because it's fine to set that all in place right now and to do the vote, but what does that look like? Because I understand that the country that we have actually said only has 3 items that they sell, and we sell many, and GDP changes. Those people also have slaves. So what I would like to know is what this country would look like then after we go in for vote.
Well, Mitch will have a comment on it, but when we go through the transition, I think we'll transition all our laws to minimize disruption, and then we can have a process for a constitutional conference. My hope is that we become a republic. There doesn't seem to be a lot of desire to replicate a commonwealth, which I respect, and we can lay out a clear and simple constitution and have very simple transitional tax rules to get us to a no-tax situation as well. But I think that's something that has to be developed in consultation with Albertans after we've made the transition to independence.
So just, we're planning to have a constitutional conference 60 days after the vote, so that the people are going to be able to be represented and decide the rules, the new rules. There's going to be no government involved in that. Kosovo actually used that as a lever to get independent, and the international community recognized them as being free after their constitutional conference. And the new constitution was supported by the citizens. So the new constitution in our case is going to be written by the citizens, so we're assuming that the citizens are going to support it. So that's also a path to independence all by itself. So the new rules, how it's going to look is we're going to make the new rules, and the new rules are going to be, the government is going to have to live by those rules, probably, I don't know how long that takes, but right away after that. And then we'll chart our own path forward as a group.
Thank you. Can we have a round of applause for these 2 gentlemen?
Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
And now I request your closing remarks. Anything that you didn't get to say earlier, you wish you could have said, whatever messages you have for people, perhaps you have guidance regarding next steps. Well, your closing remarks, please, gentlemen.
Okay, so just what I would have to say is just understand that Stay Free Alberta is going to morph into something else, and we're going to continue this battle after we're done. We're going to revive the project again as well. One or two of those is going to become a third party, I'm sure. And we're actually going to get multiple third parties, like you said, Benita. So we're going to continue the fight starting one day after the referendum is over. When we deliver our signatures to EA, we're going to have a party here in Edmonton. We're all going to go there and celebrate the victory because we will have a referendum for independence. And away we go.
You have an opportunity to do the most important thing you can do, which is to build a better future for your kids and your grandkids. We've never had an opportunity to do this. This is real. We can pull it off. Everybody's just got to work really hard, and we can build the freest, most prosperous country in the world right here in Alberta.
Thank you again, gentlemen, for being here, for going on tour as you go. One of the most important websites to look at is stayfreealberta.com, stayfreealberta.com. You can see petition signing, locations there, and more. As you're on your way out, if you haven't yet signed the petition, it's available. Plus, you can sign up with our registration tonight so we can follow up with you at some point about coming events and initiatives. Additionally, there's another initiative happening. It is a recall campaign in the provincial constituency of St. Albert, and that's happening right now. So if you live in the constituency of St. Albert and you currently have an NDP MLA, you may want to sign up as a supporter of that campaign. You could be a canvasser or a volunteer or a donor, lots of ways to give. Even if you don't live in that constituency, you can still support the campaign. Thanks again, everyone, for coming. My name is Benita Peterson with the Facebook page, Alberta Independence Movement. Thank you all so much.
The wind's whispering your name. Time to answer the question. Hey, Alberta! The wind's whispering your name. Time to answer the question. From the Calgary Tower to the Peace River Plain, we've carved our own story through the snow and the rain. All in the ground and the cattle run free, but Ottawa's grip keeps holding the key. We pay the bills, we fight the fights, yet every decision gets lost in the light. Do you agree that the province of Alberta should cease to be a part of Canada to become an independent state? Do you agree? Do you agree? Raise your steps and let the whole world see Alberta strong, Alberta free. This ain't about anger, this ain't about spite. Just want the future we know is right. Our kids, our land, our rules, our way. One ballot, one voice, one beautiful day. Do you agree that the province of Alberta should cease to be a part of Canada, to become an independent state? Do you agree? Yeah. Do you agree? Yeah. Alberta strong, Alberta free. The true north now runs through me. Do you agree? Alberta, do you agree? Let's write our own history. Do you agree? Alberta, do you agree? Let's write our own history.
Hello, thanks for tuning in, guys. That was awesome. I'm in the middle of my cocoon here, so thanks very much for tuning in. We have 1,500 subscribers, people watching today. I'm just backstage here because I had the audiovisual system here. So basically, I'm at the Morinville Cultural Center, and I'm just taking the sound from the soundboard that's in here. So I was given a sound line for that, which is quite actually helpful. I just wanted to thank you all the guys for the the super chats. That was very kind of you. The super chats and the e-transfers that were very cool to see. And we'll see you next week for other ones. I'm looking forward to schedule a few live streams there and there and there. Looking forward to do at one in Fort Mac most likely, and the one in St. Paul and other things. So we'll see you there. Until next time, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all the people who were, and thanks for the people who were in the audience too, like in the audience, because right now I'm just on my laptop and this is like the stage, just the backstage area. So that's why it's like so weird. The light is like, there's a front panel with LED, green LEDs pointing right at me, which is kind of cool. But yeah, so thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. And until then, cheery up. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good one.